The May King would select his bride by handing an apple to the most beautiful. So there are of course variations in this, but the core is the same, the purpose is also the same. The May King would of course become the lord of the society, and the May Queen would become the lady, as explained in my previous paganism video. These kings and queens, they became deities, so they received the attributes of the deities. The queen would of course receive a cauldron. This water would be sacred, and it would be purified and would be healing and so forth. And anyone who drank from it would be blessed by the goddess. The king would receive the male deity attributes, such as the crown, symbolizing the sun deity, or the halo of the sun deity behind it, with the sunbeams reaching up towards the sky. And he would receive a hammer, or known later on as a scepter, which of course was the power of Jupiter or Thor, and the ability to create fire. Originally it was just a rock. A hammer actually means rock. If you take the etymology of the word hammer, it boils down to the meaning simply rock. And of course you create fire by using a rock, by striking a rock against another. And when you do, you also create sparks. Just like the thunder in the sky creates lightning, or it doesn't actually do that, but it is always followed by lightning. And the lightning of the sky god, or the sky deities, was symbolized by a sword. And of course, if he took the sword and put on the shoulder of one of his subjects, he would bless them with the power of the sun, which was then transferred via the hammer strike, causing a lightning down to earth. So these were the regalia of the pagan king. They didn't just become kings, they became the deities. They were reincarnations of the deities themselves. The king could not touch the ground, because if he did, he would lose his power, which of course is linked to lightning and grounding of things. If you touch the ground, you lose your electricity, so to speak. It goes into the ground. Therefore, they carried him around on shields, or they they pulled him in wagons and so forth. And this tradition with a May Queen and a May King goes back as far as we know. Lord and lady. What are these terms? What do they mean? Let's find out. Lord and lady. They are originally pagan religious titles. Lady derives from Old English levdige, which means baker of bread, and lord derives from Old English lavard, which means bread warden. It derives from Proto-Germanic chleiba wardas, which of course is more comprehensible. And I can add that my Russian viewers will probably recognize the term for bread in Russian as well, where they called it chleb. Of course, both these words derive from the same. In Norwegian, we still have the word, but as in another meaning. We say leif, which means a piece of bread. And of course, it's the same origin. The day before each high festival, the lady would lead a procession from farm to farm, and they would collect food items. Pork, egg and flour, and also baked bread that would be handed out to all the guests attending the high festival by the Lord. And of course, the Lord and the Lady were impersonating deities. They were impersonating Freyr and Freya. In German, you still have this name used for ladies. A lady in German is, of course, a Frau, and a young or a maiden in German is a Fräulein. And in the Scandinavian languages as well, we still use that term instead of the Lord. We say Frue for a lady, and Fröken for maidens. But in English, they, for some reason, use these titles instead. But the origin is the same, and the role they had was the same.
4, 3, 2, 1.
They were impersonating the deities. They were the rulers of the society, and they would collect the food from the area, and they would distribute it justly amongst all the participants in the high festivals. Thor with the hammer. One of the most popular deities, and a deity for rain and agriculture. And the reason for this is that Thor is actually a personification of the force of gravity. And you might argue that Newton was the one who found out about gravity and so forth, but that's nonsense. And I cannot prove it, but I can show you pretty convincing evidence that they knew perfectly well about the force of gravity long before Newton and long before Christianity arrived. And they also lost this knowledge because Christianity arrived. And Thor is a deity of gravity. His hammer returns to his hand when he throws it, just like when you throw a rock into the air, it will return to your hand because of gravity. And his hammer is He can make it grow small or large. He can make it so small that he can just fit it into his pocket. Which of course suggests strongly that they knew perfectly well that gravity is not a question about size, but mass. His mother is the deity called Jord, that is Mother Earth. And as we know, that's a big, massive lump of stone flying about in space. Thor himself is known in the Roman mythology as Jupiter. And as we know, Thor is the guardian of the deities. He protects them from the Jotuns, the Jotnar, the stone and ice giants from outer space. And he protects our planet by means of gravity. It's the gravitational field of the planet Jupiter that prevents all these ice and rock giants from outer space to come smashing into our planet and destroy our planet or destroy all life on our planet. So it's Thor protecting us. His buff of strength, Megin is means simply Megin is strength and Jord is earth. So it's the strength of the earth. And as we know, the strength of the earth is gravity. So we return to the most common perception of him as the deity of rain and agriculture. And as we know, what is it that makes the rain fall to the ground, if not gravity? It's gravity. So Thor is a personification of the force of gravity. He is also a god of thunder, and therefore he chases Loki. Loki being the lightning. Loki means lightning. Thor means thunder. And as we know, whenever you see lightning, shortly after you hear the thunder. So Thor chases Loki. And I guess there's more to say about this, but that will suffice for this time. Sometimes I read books by people who state that the pagans made human sacrifices to their gods, and they try to use this as evidence supporting the claim that they were primitive barbarians, savages. But did they really make human sacrifices? Let's find out. When they produced criminals, sometimes they executed them. And their deities were their supreme judges, so they executed them by sacrificing them to the deities of justice. So, in effect, they just executed criminals. They didn't sacrifice children or virgins or the sort of innocents. They simply took the most despicable individuals amongst themselves and hung them. chopped their heads off. Simple as that. And they did this in the name of a deity of justice, and therefore it was defined as a human sacrifice, or seen as a human sacrifice. So there's nothing in this as suggested by the Christians, like some sort of demand from these primitive deities that you have to sacrifice human beings to this or that deity. No.
And so begins your purification.
One of the main problems with paganism today is image. Most people identify it with ganja smoking hippies who just use paganism as an excuse to behave in a non-Christian fashion, so to speak.
By fire, be cleansed. Step into the light, mortal.
And when we grow up, if we hear about paganism at all in school or elsewhere, we hear about a cartoonish version of paganism, where the pagans are presented as basically complete idiots, believing in physical gods riding on in chariots pulled by goats or cats, or riding horses with 8 legs, and of course it's presented to us that way intentionally. They want us to think of paganism as something childish, something ignorant, and something absolutely ludicrous.
By fire, be cleansed. I will never.
What we should do with paganism today, or rather, what we should do with our mythologies, is to unlearn everything we know. We have to start from scratch and ask us questions regarding everything that we thought we knew. For example, Odin. All the myths about Odin in Scandinavian mythology. Are they really myths about Odin? And of course we assume that they are, but in reality they're not. The myths about Odin are not about Odin the deity. The myths about Odin in the Scandinavian mythology are myths describing what human beings did when they were impersonating Odin. And the myths about Odin, they don't describe what Odin did or said or learned or whatever. They describe what the human beings did in order to learn, in order to grow wiser and so forth. And they did so impersonating Odin, because Odin is the deity of wisdom, of the runes, the secrets. And in order to learn these secrets, in order to gain access to these secrets, you have to become Odin. You have to impersonate Odin. And what the myths describe is not Odin, but what you and I are supposed to do in order to learn these secrets, in order to learn the runes. And of course, rune is just a term for secrets. It doesn't refer to these the rune symbols. It's a word that means simply secret. So, in order to learn these secrets about life and the world we live in, have to impersonate Odin. You have to become like Odin. And that's just one example of how you have to unlearn everything you knew and start over again and approach paganism and our myths in a completely different way. You have to assume that everything you know is wrong, and you have to try to learn it anew by yourself. And when you do, you will understand that it's not at all a cartoonish religion. It's not based on ignorance. It's not in any way like the Christians or atheists or humanists or whatever you wish to call them have presented for us over the years. And I use the myths about Odin as an example, but in reality, all our myths are not what they have told us. I mean, all our myths are descriptions of different mysteries. And of course, a mystery is just a ritual, a high festival. So it's like a script. If you can imagine a pagan festival being like a theater, a play, then the myth is a script that the players follow, and by doing so they learn something.
The Yuletide is a celebration where we, give presents to children and take in special trees and decorate and so forth. And there are many customs related to this that the Christians have tried to explain as some sort of Christian tradition. They attributed delivering of gifts to some Greek saint from Byzantium, Saint Nicholas. They claim that the person being born on this day is Jesus or Christ. But is that true? Let's find out. Yuletide is part of an initiation ritual for children that starts with Halloween, about a month earlier. And in Halloween, the children go into the realm of the dead, the burial mounds, to select a name for themselves. They want to be reborn as one of their dead forebears. So they go into the burial mound of the person they choose to become, and then they collect the valuables, the items that this person was buried with, and then they take them out. However, they just hand them over to the sorcerer of the society, and he will keep these items for some time, because the initiation ritual is not completed during the Halloween. That's just the beginning of it. And around Yuletide, the initiation is complete. Then you have then the sorcerer will divide the children into two groups. Those who succeeded with their initiation, the good children, and those who failed, the bad children. And on the Yule Eve, the sorcerer collects all these children. They are away from home in this period, and they collect all the children, and then they travel from farm to farm, and they come home to their parents, and they are then also given these items that they collected from the dead, the elves. The spirits of the dead are called elves. So the good children will get these gifts from their forebears, and in a sense they just get the items they owned in their previous lives, because they have now become the person in the grave. So the person just returns, get back his own items, and is now reborn. The bad children, rather, they only get some ashes from the grave because they didn't succeed. They have to try again next year. Sorry. And then described by the Christians as the wild hunt or the wild ride, and it's described as the deities riding around and visiting all the different farms and wreaking havoc. But in reality, it's just the sorcerer leading a company of these newly initiated children that have been reborn with a new name. They are now the dead forebears, and they visit all their relatives and introduce themselves with their new name. And this is a tradition we call julebok in Scandinavia, and it's associated with a goat. I cannot explain exactly why, but and so they travel around from farm to farm to introduce themselves with their new names. They have returned. They are no longer dead. And Yuletide does not finish there. It continues on to what we today call the New Year's Eve, when all these children, along with the adults, in a symbolic battle, fight against the winter spirits, the winter, in order for the summer to be able to return. And they also fight their own shadows. Therefore, it's said that the shadows, in the mythology, is called Ragnarok, and they say that the shadows return from the realm of the dead. And the reason for this is that in the Yuletide, the living has to call for the dead to come, the elves. And when they do, they open the portal to the realm of the dead. So not only do the elves return, the dead, but also their shadows, their bad aspects, the things they want to forget. And on the New Year's Eve, they fight these shadows. And of course, you only have to shine a light on a shadow to banish it. So they win. And at the end of this battle, fought with this, they ran through the forest with torches and screamed and tried to scare away these shadows and winter spirits, and of course banish the shadows with their torches. We still do the same today with fireworks and so forth. And at the end of this battle, they had destroyed the negative things that the reborn dead had done in previous lives. So they didn't want to be reborn with all the flaws of their forebears. They only wanted to be reborn with the good things. So they banished the flaws, they banished the negative aspects, and then when they had done that, they made a promise to become better, not to be like they had been in the past. And we do the same today. People promise to stop smoking or something like that. And of course this is known as the New Year's promise. So, the birth of Christ, it has nothing whatsoever to do with this. And the reason why they say a deity is born during the Yuletide is that the bear is said to give birth to her cubs on the winter solstice. And in the mythology, it is the birthday of the sky god, of Tyr, of Zeus, Jupiter, Rod, or Div in Slavic religion. And so this is the birthday of the sky god. And of course the Christians wanted to identify Jesus with the most, or the deity they thought was the most important, namely the sky god. And I can just add at the end that all the deities have their birthdays, of course. You have the 13 main deities who have a birthday every month, and then you have 4 deities connected to the 4 seasons. They have their birthdays on the solstices and the equinoxes. So it is true that more people went to church in the past, and the reason for this is simply that they were forced to.
The Vanir and the Aesir are often described as 2 different races of deities. But is it really so? Let's find out. The great battle described in the mythology between the Aesir and the Vanir is in reality a description of a selection process that took place every year, where the men competed for the title of the May King. And those who won were called the most beautiful, as we know from Greek mythology as well. When Paris hands an apple to the deity he finds the most beautiful, that is, the winner of the men's contest gave an apple to the woman he found the most beautiful, and then so she would be the winner and she would be the May Queen. And this couple was seen as the most beautiful. And Vanir is simply a term for the most beautiful. So we can see the same in the name Venus. The root ven and van is the same, it means beautiful. So it had nothing to do with a war whatsoever. They competed, and we know these games they competed with as from the later ages as well, as the medieval knights tournaments. So they had these ring games, also called knight games, and they threw spears and they competed. And again, from Greece we know these as the Olympic Games, which of course is just one of 4 games in the Greek world. They had 4 different. And these contests were held every single year. And in Scandinavia, this was, of course, in a smaller scale. The reason for the war is that the May Queen and the May King are supposed to represent the deities, or the best of the deities, and they are supposed to be young and strong and beautiful, and they have to be, otherwise nature will suffer. The May couple, no matter who they were, no matter for how long they had been a May couple, would have to compete in the same game along with all the other challengers every year. So of course eventually they would lose and be replaced, and the women would grow old and or older, and they would be replaced by younger and more beautiful women. The men would grow old and weaker, and they would be replaced by stronger men. And therefore this is it's an annual contest. And in the mythology it's described as a war. And so Vanir means simply the most beautiful. That is, those amongst the Aesir that are the most beautiful. And Aesir means simply spirit, and it's a term for describing the deities. Yep, jag kommer.
Another group of thieves trying to steal my horse.
I can mention the third power discussed in the mythology, namely Jotnar. That would be the Atins. And this term translates simply as hunger, or the hungry, and refers to the uncontrollable and negative forces in nature and man.
4, 3, 2, 1.
So there are no different races in our mythology, only description of different forces in nature.
Beware.
Hello, I just checked the goblin entry on Wikipedia, and it says here that a goblin is a legendary evil or mischievous, grotesque, dwarf-like creature. Is it really? Let's find out.
4,
We have to start with the pagan Halloween festival. This is an initiation ritual, or the start of an initiation ritual, suggested by the name Hallow Evening. And in the pagan past, the children were not seen as real human beings, as real men, until they had gone through this initiation ritual that started on the Halloween. I'm not going to go into detail about this particular high festival. If you want to find out everything there is to know really about Halloween, you can find that in this book, the Mythology book, and you can also find some information in Sorcery and Religion in Ancient Scandinavia, which is much cheaper than this book. And so I skip that part right now and go right to the Yule celebration, because the children in the Halloween festival, they enter the realm of death, which explains why they are dressing up to look like the dead, because only the dead have access to the realm of death. And in the Yuletide they return, and they return as a newborn. They have taken the identity of a dead person and has, in a sense, become this dead person. They have the same name, the same honor, the same debt as the person they chose to become in this initiation ritual, which of course, the dead person is of course one of the dead forebears. So they become one of these forebears, and they return in the Yuletide, and they return in the night. They are led by the sorcerer or the deity, and they go from farm to farm with these children to, bring them back home. And they come in the night, and in this context, the families, of course, they wish them welcome, and they used to put some food on the table to enable them to eat and feel welcome when they come back home with their new name and everything. And as we know, in the Christian era, those in power wanted to destroy this tradition. They wanted to destroy the European culture. So they demonized these children and turned them into grotesque, legendary, evil, or mischievous, grotesque dwarf-like creatures. And they persecuted the people who celebrated these ancient traditions. They had to take the food, and they couldn't put it on the table inside their home, because if they did, then the police or the priests inspecting their houses would find out. So they put the porridge or the food into the barn. And we learn from the Christian sources that these goblins are evil spirits who you have to feed, and you have to put food to them in the barn, etc. But in reality, it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. It's just the children returning, they had to feed them, and they were persecuted for it, so they had to feed them secretly in the barn. They were not spirits, they were not evil, certainly. They were just the children returning from their initiation ritual. And of course, we identify, if you go to Tolkien's interpretation of the goblins, he says, or at least in one of the explanations, it's said that the goblins were the twisted, corrupted elves. And this is based on the fact that the children who were reborn, they would go into the realm of the dead, and they would become the dead. And the dead were residing in the realm of the dead in the form of elves. And so elves are just the spirits of the dead, of the noble dead. So in a sense, Tolkien twisted and corrupted this image and turned it into a goblin, an orc.
Our people must be nourished. They are the backbone of our rebellion.
I think the image of these innocent children that has been turned by Christians into this evil, mischievous, grotesque, dwarf-like creature is a very good picture. And it illustrates well what the Christians have done to our culture. They have taken a beautiful European pagan religion, pagan tradition, pagan culture, and twisted it and turned it into some sort of grotesque mockery of what it really was. If you take a book about our mythology, our religion, you will not find our religion at all described there. You will find this grotesque, twisted, corrupted image of our religion that was made by the Christians in an attempt to destroy, to weed out our roots, to cut our roots, so that our culture, our peoples would fall.
Surely many of those you freed were to be exiled. You saved many lives today.
Seidr? Is it feminine? Is it womanish? Does it involve the practice of homosexuality? Let's find out. The term Seidr means simply customs or tradition, and it in fact has nothing whatsoever to do with the practice of sorcery. The women were the guardians of Seidr, so to speak, because the women were responsible for the education of children and the education of, or the preservation of the customs, the traditions. They had a high responsibility, and it was they did this for ages, and therefore, of course, also we see the women being pointed out as witches and evil in the Middle Ages, when the Judeo-Christians went forth to exterminate our culture. Of course, the women were in their way because they kept our culture alive. They taught their children about, say, the traditions. The sorcery in ancient Scandinavia was called galder, and it involves simply casting spells in different ways. They could be songs or rhymes or carvings in different in wood or stone or whatever, and this was the actual sorcery. The Seidr was just the tradition, the customs. The spirits were seen as they were not seen as male or female. They were seen as both male and female, like hermaphroditic. And to manipulate these spirits, they believed, the sorcerers believed, that they had to impersonate them. And they did by dressing up as them and to lose the human shape and to take form of some sort of elemental or spirit. And thus they wore robes. And as we know, robes means simply a dress, and a robe is a feminine piece of clothing, and therefore the men who put on these robes were seen as womanish. They put on robes, women's clothing. At the same time, the female sorcerers, they put on men's clothing on the upper body. So they too impersonated these hermaphroditic spirits, and they believed that they had to, in order to manipulate them and to channel their powers for use in sorcery. Instead of trying to manipulate them by means of spells, they ask them to help them. They pray to them and sacrifice to them. And when doing so, naturally they gave them names. And names are usually male or female. So with time, the different spirits, the hermaphroditic spirits, turned into male and female deities. But the tradition, the Seidr, continued. It didn't just disappear. So in a sense, the new Osatru, you could call it, the belief in the deities, it didn't replace Seidr, it just supplemented it. It came in addition to it. So both were practiced at the same time.
We will bring our wrath to bear on Ellison for this injustice.
The things I say in this video is not something I figured out myself. This is something my wife figured out. However, she doesn't speak English very well, so I'm gonna make a video instead. When you suffer from amnesia, the way to recover your memory is by being exposed to things you were familiar with, to things you had love for, or at least a passionate relationship to. So, for example, if you have lost your memory, you will be exposed to a child of yours, or your wife or husband and so forth. Or some item that you love, something that you were very closely connected to emotionally. When you see these things or these persons, you start to remember, and then you start to remember things connected to them and so forth, and that's how you regain your memory. In this video I'm going to explain how you can know yourself, how you can recognize yourself and be reborn as yourself. So you see, what you do is that you enter the burial mound and you recognize the items that you owned in your previous life. And when you do, you start to remember your previous life. It opens up, you start to grow brain cells, so to speak. You start to remember not only your experiences, but also all the things that you actually knew in your former life. So just like with amnesia, you see the things that you were emotionally connected to somehow, and you recognize them. And when you do, it opens up the world that you used to live in. It opens up everything that you wear. You remember it. You start to remember. You see the mail shirt that you were buried with maybe 200 years ago. You see the sword, and you start to remember. And this is like the trigger that enables you to remember everything. You really become yourself. You really remember who you were. And this is only possible, of course, if you were that person in the grave, if it's actually you. And therefore you have certain tests that will enable you to identify yourself, or rather that enables the society to identify you as this person. And when you have been identified as this person, or if you have been identified as a potential candidate to be reborn as this person, you gather all these individuals who would potentially be that person in the grave, and you test them. You present some of the items that this person used to own, and only those who recognize them. If you for example put 5 different swords on the table, and only those who pick the right sword would be that person. And then you have a multitude of such tests, and in the end you will be left with only one candidate, and this is the right person. And when this person enters the grave to collect the rest of his former belongings, he will become himself. And as we know from the mythology and from fairy tales, it is often important to know your name. What was your name? And then you have certain nicknames for a person. But in order to be reborn, and people would know the person from his or her nicknames. But in order to be reborn as this person, you have to enter the grave, and then the password that you have to give to the person inside waiting for you would be the name of that person. Who were you? What is your name? And if you know, then you're the right person. And you can know because you have seen the items you used to own. You have started the process of remembering. And then you can enter the burial mound and realize that my name is this or that. You remember all of a sudden. So it's not just a theory. It's not just superstitions. It's not just religion. It's actually quite scientific. as you can see from those who suffer from amnesia, they regain their memories, they start to remember again by being presented to these items, and they become themselves eventually. And so can you, if you identify yourself and become yourself again. And when you do, you remember what you used to know.
Sunþudagar, mánadagar. Vúðanadagar, þunadagar, frájudagar, heimadalþadagar. Feu, Uruj, Thursaj, Ansuj, Raitho, Kauna, Kebo, Wina, Hagalaj, Nauthi, Isaj, Yera, Iwaj, Tarthi, Algish, Sovili, Tiwaj, Barco, Ewash, Manj, Lagush, Ingush, Dagash, Othala. Seidr, Åsatro. Now I'm going to read the names of the deities in Norse and then in Proto-Nordic. Baldur, Balduj. Jord, Erfi. Freyr, Fraujas. Freya, Frajon. Forseti, Forasitan. Hoður, Hadnuj. Heimdallur, Heimadalþar. Moni, Manan. Njörður, Narþuj. Soga, Sagon. Skadi, Skanthan. Suna, Suvilaj. Tyr, Tiwaj. Thor, Thunaj. Voli, Walan. Vidar, Widanaj. Odin, Vodanaj. I can also do the unsympathetic deities. Ægir Agiaj, Auðhumlo, Auðahumlon, Auster, Austan. Bolthorn, Bellathorn, Bor, Buraj, Fjorgin, Fargunjo, Hel, Haljo, Idun, Ithund, Loki, Lukan, Not, Natti, Skuld, Skuldi, Svarter, Svartars, Verdandi, Wirthandin, Ymir, Wumjaj, Urður, Wurthjoj. There you go. I can also add that I have a new book for Mythic Fantasy role-playing game out now, Men and Monsters. It's available from Amazon.
Quite often I hear claims that we cannot reconstruct the European religion, the European tradition, because it's so far away, it's so much is lost, and alas, we just have to accept that it's lost forever. And those who claim that are, of course, not European polytheists. They are not pagans. They are Christians or Jews or Muslims or communists or something like that. And the truth is that, yes, the Christians tried to destroy our culture, our traditions. Tried to weed out everything that had anything to do with Europe, but they failed. And we can easily reconstruct our ancient religion because we have archaeology, we have our fairy tales, and we have our myths. And if you have the key to these myths, to the archaeological finds, to the fairy tales, then you will see that all the way from the Stone Age and to the present, there has been only one idea, the pagan idea, the European idea. And it's the same idea. You find it in the archaeological finds, you find it in the first writings, you find it in Homer, and you find it in modern fairy tales, and you find it in us, in our very spirit. And all you need to understand our own religion is a key. And this key will be included for you in a book called Forebears that my wife is writing. My wife has also written a philosophical book that can be interpreted as an introduction to Forebears, the book. It's called Le Besoin d'Impossible, which means the need for the impossible. And you can find it on Amazon. The Christians have, since the start of Christianity, tried to destroy our culture all over Europe. But they failed. And when they today say that we cannot reconstruct the old religion, they do that because they are terrified of the fact that our European religion is still here. Even after 2,000 years of their attempts to destroy it, it's still here. And you know why? It's because we are still here. The Christians have finally understood that they cannot destroy us. They cannot destroy our religion. They cannot make us accept their Middle Eastern faith. Because our religion is in our blood. And therefore, they have understood that the obstacle
in their way of achieving a Christendom in Europe is to destroy us. And that's why they flood our countries with immigrants who are from the same region as their religion, the Middle East. Many people today reject religion for being religion. No matter what type of religion it is, they reject it. When you reject religion, I understand you, but please do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The concept of gods or deities in the European religion is not at all similar to that of the Hebrew, Abrahamic, Middle Eastern religions. The deities in European religion are more like symbols and metaphors, and they represent something, a real force in nature. It's a type of symbolism, it's a type of sorcery, and it's rooted in real science. It is completely in harmony with what we today know about science. When you look at the deities as they are represented in mythology, for example, you have to look at them as if you were driving a car and looking at the road signs. And likewise, in the past, the deities represented something. So the European religion was more than anything a scientific worldview. The deities are all symbols of real powers, of real forces in us and in nature, and also they symbolize different processes in us and nature. Note also that the term God simply means good. It is something good in us or in nature. That's the etymological origin of the term God. Our European religion is nothing like these foreign Hebrew, Middle Eastern religions. In the European tradition, we don't have a linear view with a beginning and an end. We have a circular view where there is no beginning and no end.
You know, there is no night and day, or a day and night. There is a night, a morning, a midday, a day, an afternoon, an evening, and then a night again. So it all goes in circles. Likewise, you have a winter, you have a spring, a summer, and a fall. And you have the moon phases, you have the earth spinning. We are dead, we are born, we live, we die, we are dead again, and we are born again. We live, we die, we are dead, and so forth. Everything revolves in a circle. You sleep, you wake up, you are awake, you fall asleep, and you are asleep again. You wake up, you are awake, fall asleep again, and so forth. No beginning, no end, just a movement in circles.
Instead of breathing life, she consumes all around.
It all revolves, round, around, around. No beginning, no end.
The dream has changed, yet I will protect it still.
We are told that Ask and Embla are the two first human beings created by the gods in the Norse mythology. But is this true? Let's find out. The different pre-Christian high festivals are often carried out like some sort of play, like in the Greek theatre. And the actors, they didn't put on masks necessarily as we know it from the Greek plays, but they did something similar. They dressed up, they impersonated different forces of nature. And on the New Year's Eve, they divided into two groups. One group represented the gods, and the other group represented the winter spirit, and or the winter spirits. And these winter spirits were seen as responsible for killing Balder on the autumn equinox. And in order for Balder to return, that is the summer, they had to kill these spirits. And they did this symbolically. They took torches and ran into the forest, and there they had this great battle between the actors playing the gods and the actors playing the winter spirits. And in this battle, they took the costumes of the winter spirits and tore them off them and stepped on them. And in mythology, we know this as Ragnarok, and we know that the wolf, the Fenrir wolf, is killed by having someone steps in his jaw and just rips him apart. And you can imagine if you have a wolf skin on you and somebody can take the mouth or the upper jaw of the wolf and just tear it off you like tears off like a costume, and then steps on the costume to symbolically kill the wolf, because the wolf was a winter animal, like a symbol of the winter spirit. And then, of course, when this was done, they took the actors that had played these winter animals, they were pretending to be dead, and they carried them to the burial mound. You see, before they could become the winter spirits, they had to be symbolically killed. So they took their clothes and hung them in the sacrificial tree. And there they became dead. And then they put on these winter spirit costumes. And in order to revive them, they took the bodies of these symbolically killed winter actors, and they carried them back to the sacred trees, and then they put back their clothes on them. And in a sense, in the mythology, they describe this as the gods giving them the life force, the mind and the spirit back. And thus they were resurrected. So the mythology is actually not talking about how they created Ask or Embla, but they're just talking about two sacrificial trees, the ash and the elm, and how the winter actors were symbolically resurrected after they had been symbolically killed on Ragnarok. And I can add that today we still celebrate this holiday, the New Year's Eve, and in a sense we do it the same way. In the past they used torches and burning wheels and hit burning wood to make the sparks fly, and they screamed and tried to scare away and kill the winter spirits. And today we do the same with fireworks. We fire rockets into the sky and things are exploding, and it's basically the same.
I have faced the nightmare before, but never has it had so thorough a stranglehold on the dream. It hungers, desperate to seed its corruption. Do not let its whispers seduce you into madness.
The academics, they never seem to get it right, do they? Is this intentional or is this by chance? It's because they have their field of vision narrowed down at the universities. They're not allowed to look outside the box. I think that's the problem, really. They are unable to see reality because they're just programmed to see a little bit of it.
There is no devil in European tradition.
we have not inherited Thule from our ancestors. We have borrowed it from our children.
The concept of good and versus evil is ludicrous. It doesn't compute with reality at all. If you take a look at the sun now, it lights up my world, but it can also blind me, right? So is it good or is it evil? Is it good because it lights up my world? Or is it evil because it blinds me? It's neither, of course. The sun warms me, doesn't it? But it can also burn me. So is the sun good for warming me, or is it evil for burning me? Sorry, it doesn't make any sense. Nature is not like that. These are human invented concepts that don't compute with reality. And in the European tradition, a good force will only be good for a certain amount of time, or a constructive for a certain amount of time, and then it has to be replaced by something else. There is no good and evil in the European tradition, but we do have right and wrong, or good and bad. And anything that serves its purpose is good, but when it no longer does, but continues to do so anyway, then it's bad, of course, and then it ends, or has to end. Growing up is good, isn't it? But when you are adult, when you have reached a certain height, then you would like to stop growing. Then growing is no longer good. Otherwise you would break your back in the end because of gravity.
From our ancestors. We have borrowed it from our children.
Ok, da er vi fremme ved dolmen.
Mamma har tatt sine dukkene av dine. Men nei, du fortsetter det.
Nå må jeg komme. Vi skal dra nå. Sofie, kan du slutte? Stiva, kan du komme? Nå må vi gå! Ja, det er snø. Tiva, kan du slutte nå? Men du kommer til å være helt iskald, Tiva. Vi er 1,5 time hjemmefra.
Bakar fikir bazar. Yusuf.
The farmer skillfully cultivates the land, He cuts down the trees and prepares his crops. He constantly has to fight nature, trying to take back what he has cultivated. The hunter-gatherer instead lives with nature. He does not fight nature. Instead of eating only one type of plant, he eats what he can find. He never cuts down anything to give room for what he prefers, but instead moves on to find other edible plants. This conflict has existed for some time, and originally we were hunter-gatherers. We did not meddle in the affairs of nature. We were a part of nature. We never tried to be better. We never thought that we were above nature. And this is where Christianity and the other Abrahamistic religions come in. Because all other men of all creeds and breeds live in nature and with nature, and does not hold any contempt for nature. But the Abrahamistic religions is made up of individuals with only contempt for nature. Their whole universe centers not around nature, not around harmony or life on earth. Their whole universe centers around God. And God, they think, is above nature. The ideal is to transcend nature, is to rise above it, and to no longer be a part of it. But we are, and we have always been. And the only way we can achieve this Abrahamistic fantasy is to destroy nature and to die. And that is what they do. This Abrahamistic faith has come from the desert, and it brought with it the desert, and it is turning Europe into a desert. Not only our beautiful nature, our minds all turn to dust. Our minds all turn to dust.
Embrace the shadows.
Our minds all turn to dust. This is my skin color, and this is my natural habitat. My skin is so light that I can survive in a forest with only a very little sunshine. This is a sick forest though, compared to the forest we used to have in Europe. There's still some things to eat, some plants to eat, but it's almost like a desert. And what we need to do to these forests, these sick forests in our modern Europe, is to revive them, is to restore them to the state they were in before agriculture. We need to add diversity. We need to take the plants that used to grow in the forest and return them to the forest.
Det er langt nede.
Ja. Nå står jeg under deg.
Er det trygt å prøve å hoppe?
Å hoppe ned på bakken, mener du?
Ja.
Hva synes du?
Ja.
Du kan henge etter hendene.
Yes.
The current legal system is based on Roman law, not on Germanic law. And I'm going to explain to you the difference, or rather I'm going to explain to you what Germanic law was about. I have written about it and included what I found in this role-playing game, so I'm actually just going to read from this. There were slight variations from area to area, but by and large this is what Germanic law was about. If you murder somebody, you had to pay compensation to the family of the victim. If you murdered someone a second time, you would be executed. If you murdered two people, you would be executed right away. If you murdered a woman, you would have to pay a fine that was twice as large as normal. If you killed somebody, you had to pay compensation to the family of the person you killed. Homosexuality. If you engaged in any homosexual interaction, you would be executed. And your body would be thrown into a bog, because they didn't want that these despicable degenerates would return to life. I have to stress though that this is not necessarily my opinion, but that is how they saw it at that time in history. If you stole something or vandalized something, you had to pay compensation equal to the value of the object or the item or whatever you vandalized or stole. If you stole a horse though, you would be executed. If you committed adultery, you would be outlawed for 1 year and a day. The second time you committed adultery, you would be executed. If you run away from battle, you would be executed. Some places you would probably only be executed if you did that a couple of times, but and of course this only applies to males. Women don't get executed for running away from battle. If you had debt, you would have to serve as a thrall to the person you owed, you had debt to, for some time. If you were a thrall and you were disobedient, you could be executed. And that's pretty much it. You could be fined, that is, you could be in order to pay compensation, you could be outlawed, and you could be executed. The point with Germanic law was not to punish anybody. The point was to react. If you did something that was despicable, you would have to correct that behavior. And if you didn't, you were no use to the tribe, so you were executed. The purpose of outlawing was to make the person improve himself, give him a chance to become better, and he had to do that away from the tribe because they didn't want his negative influence on the society in the meanwhile until he had improved. And then, when you had improved, you could return. I can also add that when they had duels in the past, it was very, very rarely to the death. And normally you would only have a fight until first blood, or until one of the persons had left the dueling arena, which was made up of a circle basically, or a little islet or something. And the first person to start bleeding, the first person to leave the area, the arena, would be declared the loser. A duel was not necessarily a combat at all. You could also have swimming contests or word contests and so forth, like a poetry contest. So it was not just about brute force, and the person who was challenged could choose his method of dueling. So you couldn't just be a big strong guy and go around challenge people, because then the other ones would probably pick something like a climbing duel or a poetry duel or a knowledge duel, and then you would, well, probably lose.
Not many Viking ships from the Viking Age have been found. But some have, and one of them is the Oseberg ship from Norway. And archaeologists still don't really understand why it was buried like that. So let's find out why. When you see something that you used to own in a previous life, you wake up memories. You start to remember, and therefore they buried people with their precious objects, and not just precious objects in terms of value, but in terms of emotional value. So they could bury people with things that just mattered to this person only. And that's really the very simple explanation to all these burial mounds, not just in Viking Age Scandinavia, but all over Europe, because this custom is pan-European. They have done this all over Europe for ages, before Christianity came and tried to replace our culture with Middle Eastern culture. One thing the Oseberg ship found is known for is that the remains of one of these women, a thrall, probably a thrall woman or a servant woman, the youngest of these two women, belonged to a haplogroup that is not common in Europe at all. It's common in areas like Iran and India and Pakistan. The problem with this claim, though, is that only one single group have come to this conclusion. All the other groups that have tested the remains have come to a different conclusion. But of course, in this time and era, they really want Europe to have been multicultural before as well, so they ignore the many peer reviews and the other tests that show something else. So as described by my wife in her book, the common practice was for children around age 7 to enter these burial mounds and collect these items that they had owned in previous lives. And they would take the head from the dead body and the thigh bone, and they would leave the burial mound with the head held up like that. And therefore we have this image of dwarfs with because hair doesn't rot in the grave, so when you hold up the head of your forebear, it still has a beard. So, and since it's a 7-year-old child, it's still a very small creature. So this is the origin of the myth about dwarfs. And also the wealth that these dwarfs will bring from the subterranean world, the burial mound, is of course connected to this as well. They would take the items that they had owned in previous lives, and of course only the precious items like items made of gold would last a very long time. So they would, these dwarfs were very rich. They came out from the ground with a lot of gold.